Welcome back to Chess TV and our November episode. This week, Professor Arne Johansson will tell us more about the Beneke Henriksson and his will from 1358. In the opening school, Alfred and Adriana will analyze the opening from one of the games in Hugiven, and Albert will reason about chess and Machiavelli. Well, during the past month, a lot has happened in the chess world, including the prize ceremony of the Chess Olympiad for women. It was the Russian national team that took the gold after a relatively easy match against the Kazakhstan national team with 4-0 in the last round. This is the team's second Olympic gold after their last victory in Khanty-Mansiysk in 2010, so congratulations are in order. And so we head on to Corsica, where the 16th edition of the Corsica Masters has been resolved with a 153-player strong field. It was the French Grandmaster Etienne Bacrot who made it through the knockout matches and straight into the finals, in which he went up against the rival Laurent Fressinet. Bacrot won 2 games against Fressinet and was crowned winner of the Corsica Masters 2012. FIDE has published the November ratings, and not surprisingly, Carlsen is dominating the list, well over 2,800 and by a margin of 33 elo points from the nearest rival, Aronian. This kind of total domination haven't been seen since Fischer and Kasparov's days, and it should also be mentioned that Carlsen is only 3 modest elo points from Kasparov's record rating of 2,851 from 2005. You can read more about the November ratings on FIDE.com. And from good news to somewhat more serious, Grandmaster Falco Bindrich was disqualified from the Chess Bundesliga in Germany after refusing to show his smartphone to the Arbeiter, and who was forced to lose the game after 10 moves. Well, the story is more complicated than that, obviously, because after frequently visiting the bathroom with the smartphone, the Arbeiter confronted the Grandmaster, demanding to inspect the smartphone with regard to the rules in section 5.3.4 of the Bundesliga. Bindrich refused, despite the recommendation from his team leader. The Arbeiter sentenced the game to Bindrich's disadvantage and disqualified Bindrich from the tournament. The winner of the game, Grandmaster Sebastian Siebrecht, has previously been through a similar situation when his opponent in the German Championship in June admitted that he went into the bathroom with his mobile phone using a chess program for analysis. The player was disqualified from the championship and was forbidden to participate in the tournaments organized by the German Chess Federation until year 2014. Regarding Bindrich and the event on the Bundesliga, one can of course ask oneself how far an Arbeiter can go. Where can the limit for invasion of the privacy reasonably be drawn? An inspection of a cell phone can never be desirable, so perhaps it's time for the organizers to resolve the situation in a completely different way, by simply making sure that it's practically impossible to use a technical device, such as a cell phone, during a tournament. Read the full story and Bindrich's reply on chessbase.com. And so we move on to the Netherlands, where the American Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura won the 16th edition of the Univiet Chess Festival in Hugiven. 4 strong players faced off in the crown group: Nakamura, Tivyakov, Giri, and 18-year-old woman world champion Hu Yifan. Nakamura took 4.5 points out of 6 possible and had a performance rating of an incredible 2,848. For Nakamura, it would have been enough to draw in the last round to still take the gold, but after a poor performance in London earlier, where he'd lost a few elo points, the Grandmaster played his absolutely best to scrape together some elo points in order to get back to the top 10 of the FIDE list, so a draw was excluded. With the win in the last round, Nakamura finished 1.5 points ahead of the runner-up Tivyakov. We have previously told you about the incredible chess documentary Brooklyn Castle, a documentary on the IS-318, a junior high school in Brooklyn in which chess has played a major role in students' development. Today, the school is the home of the national junior high school champions, and the documentary shows us how chess has changed the school from being a school in need of improvement in 2003 to one of New York's best schools. The award-winning documentary premiered in late October, and you have to visit brooklyncastle.com to learn where you can watch the film. And finally, the results from this year's Bilbao Grand Slam finals are here. 6 of the world's strongest players took part in the final, which was played in Sao Paulo and Bilbao from September to October. The last round offered a few surprises, including the one where Magnus Carlsen defeated the world champion Viswanathan Anand through a creative and aggressive play. Magnus Carlsen could scoop his first win against the world champion in classic time control. Magnus Carlsen went even further by winning the entire final and defeating the Italian Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana in the playoffs. You can read more about the results on BilbaoMastersFinal.com because now it's time for Albert, so here you go.
Right now, the US presidential election is quite a current topic, and that's why I thought it would be highly suitable to talk about the inevitable byproduct of elections, namely election promises. We're not going to talk about how to phrase these as flexibly as possible, but rather about to which extent a prince should keep his word. Machiavelli writes that a wise prince shouldn't keep his word if it won't benefit him, and if the reason for the promise has expired. Machiavelli explains this by showing that a prince not only should be righteous, because he has two ways of fighting, both with the law and with his strength. The former proper to men and the latter to beasts. And that's why a prince should be half man and half beast, just like Achilles' teacher Chiron, who was a centaur. Machiavelli says that a prince should take after the fox and the lion, so that he both can spot the snares and be able to scare away the wolves. And chess players should learn from this thought that they should find inspiration from many different ways of thinking and playing styles to cover all of one's weaknesses. Machiavelli also theorizes that a prince shouldn't keep his word for the obvious reason that people are evil. And because people are evil and won't keep their word, you don't need to keep yours either. Besides, it's entirely allowed and maybe even desirable for a prince to be fraudulent. But, and this is important, in order to be truly fraudulent, nobody can know that you actually cheat. So if your dishonest way turned public, it will be used against you. Just look at what happened to the Swedish politician and opposition leader Juholt not so long ago. He was caught manipulating with allowances, and his political career was over. Machiavelli writes that it's of greatest importance that a prince appears to be merciful, faithful, humane, and upright, but that these traits actually aren't good for him. He also writes that people judge others with their eyes, and not by how they actually are affected by your actions. The point is not to find a good balance, but not to be limited by earlier promises. And how do politicians present themselves to be loyal and honest in modern time? Well, by elaborate and expensive campaigns, consisting of advertisement on TV and placards with smiling politicians. They all have official programs and agendas, and loudly proclaim what they stand for and what they want. But if we look at the results, it's seldom we find traces of the promises. Machiavelli writes that dishonest princes are superior to those who are always honest, because they don't harm themselves just to keep a promise. One can find that it's somewhat mean not to keep your word, but successful politicians, and the ones that actually win, are, according to Machiavelli, those who are the best at lying and deceiving. And if we are to be honest, it doesn't seem to have changed at all since Machiavelli's time.
In our last episode, we analyzed the opening played in the game between Radyabov and Svidler in the World Blitz Championship. It was certainly an interesting game where Radyabov sacrificed a pawn for the initiative, giving him enough of an attack to destroy Svidler's position. As we soon will see in today's game, which was played between the American Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura
and the Dutch Grandmaster Sergei Tiviakov in the 16th Unive Chess Festival of 2012, it differs quite a bit from the game between Radyabov and Svidler. In today's game, Nakamura managed to suppress Tiviakov's game, giving him a really tough time defending a passive position without any kind of counterplay.
The game started out with e4 and e6, the French defense. But like we have seen in our last episodes, it's quite uncommon for grandmasters to start out with one opening only to transpose into another one later on. Nakamura chose to play the not too common d3, against which Tiviakov chose to transpose the game into the closed Sicilian by playing c5.
White decided to develop in the usual manner by playing knight to f3, which was followed by knight to c6, g3 and g6. It's a common tactic against the closed Sicilian to open up for the black squared bishop to take over the a1 to h8 diagonal. But if we take a closer look at the black position, we see that there are lots of empty black squares, and the best way for white to make this weakness tangible is to open up the position.
White chose to do just that by playing the rather odd d4. Many players would never consider such a move, since it seemingly throws away a move considering the fact that white has already played d3.
And also, as we all know, you typically need your moves in the opening to give you as much development as possible. But that doesn't mean that non-development moves are automatically bad. Certainly, they require more to be worth playing, but you still shouldn't filter them away just like that. After the exchange on d4, we suddenly have a position where the black weakness is obvious. But black was here too afraid to allow knight to b5 and played a6 to stop it.
Knight to b5 is without a doubt a dangerous move, but black should have probably taken the chance and developed his piece by playing bishop to g7. Because after knight to b5, black could play d5, sacrificing a pawn. After e takes on d5, e takes on d5, and queen takes on d5. If black would capture it with the queen, white will win it back after playing knight to c7 check, followed by king to f8, and knight takes on d5. Instead of taking the queen, black should play queen to e7 check, followed by bishop to e2 and bishop to e5, giving black compensation for the pawn.
Even though black might have compensation, many players would still prefer playing white in this position, since it's often easier to play with a material advantage, especially when the compensation is as unclear as it is in this position. Black, not wanting to risk this, played a6 instead of bishop to g7, which was followed by knight takes on c6 and b takes on c6. Here, it's very important to suppress black's options and keep him from opening up his position.
White decided to advance with the c-pawn to c4 in order to stop black's advance with the d-pawn. This was followed by normal development from both sides. Bishop to g7, bishop to g2, knight to e7, and castle kingside.
White might have tried to stop black from achieving this with the d-pawn, but it doesn't look like he was successful. Tell us, why black won't play d5 now?
Well, black doesn't play d5 since the d5 pawn would be an easy target for white after an exchange on d5, followed by knight to c3. Not only is the d5 pawn under attack, but it's also pinned because of the bishop on g2. Black, not wanting to give white this focal point for his attack, decided on d6 instead.
The black position is absolutely not lost, but it isn't enviable either. White is the one with all the chances. Tiviakov never managed to get any counterplay, which made Nakamura's game quite easy, since he only had to strengthen his position and pressure black's obvious weakness on d6, which eventually led to the destruction of the black position. And with that, we end this episode of The Opening School. We hope to see you again next week.
Some time ago I received a book from a friend who had decided to get rid of it from his book collection. It was a Swedish book with a title that would translate to Libraries and Archives in Skåne during medieval times. And Skåne, well, that is the most southern part of Sweden today, but belonged to Denmark during those days. The book looks like this, and can certainly not be considered a bestseller. It is written by Laurits Weibull and was published in 1901. I was about to put it in my bookshelf and forget about it, but for some strange reason I decided to at least take a quick look at its contents. The chance of finding anything connected to chess was not great, but I started reading and found that culture and even book collection started to become popular among the priests in the 14th century in Skåne. Weibull writes that libraries started to form there during the 14th century and that the greatest book collector was a priest called Benekinus Henrici. In his will written in 1358, he lists more than 80 books and that there were several more not specified. One should keep in mind that this was long before the time of book printing, so that each book was a unique and valuable manuscript. The complete will or testament is given in Weibull's book. I thought that a book collector with reasonably broad interest maybe also have been interested in chess. So I started with my almost non-existing knowledge in Latin to read the will. It was 9 pages long and contains a huge number of gifts to various recipients. He must have been wealthy because he gives away about 10 different estates in different parts of Skåne. The will starts with the request that he wants prayers to be read for him once a year in the church of Lund, and that money should be given to the people inflicted with lepra, who were kept outside the city limits of Lund. After reading a couple of pages, I found the following. Item Domino Nicolau preposito Lundensi partem lecture hostensis cum asceribus ludum scacuorum et unum cornu, which I think means that he leaves a work of hostensis to the priest Nicholas, but also a chessboard and pieces and a horn for drinking. Well, somewhat further down I found that he gave away another chessboard with pieces to the priest Johannes, along with the drinking horn. So the testament was a really interesting object that documented the interest in chess among the priests in Skåne during the 14th century. Benike Henriksson himself was a cantor in the church of Lund, which meant that he had the responsibility for the choir and the books that belonged to the church. All this triggered me to search through the digital database at the web page of the Swedish National Archives. And although I found a number of testaments from the 14th century, there were no further traces of chess. I just suspected that Benike Henriksson must have had someone to play with, and there was one more testament in Latin reprinted in Weibull's book. So I started browsing through also that. It was a testament from 1379 after the Archbishop Nils Jönsson. Also he was a book collector, and after some reading I found a passage where he lists a number of objects that he leaves to a man, but follows that by saying that to his wife he leaves a few things made in leather and a chess set that he had obtained from the Queen of Norway, if I have understood the text correctly. Weibull states that these 2 documents are stored in the Swedish National Archives, and that some of you may remember that we earlier made a visit to the National Archives to look at the 2 oldest Swedish documents that mention chess. These are both from the year 1346, so they are from approximately the same period as the testaments from Skåne. This is a photo from that visit showing that we were assisted by the expert on medieval documents, Henrik Klackenberg. After having looked at these texts for some time, I contacted Henrik Klackenberg again, and he was kind enough to dig out the 1358 testaments from the depths of the National Archives. We took a closer look at it and found that it was a piece of parchment filled with text and of a somewhat simpler character than the one from 1346, and that we had looked at earlier. Well, this is what the Beneke Henriksson's testament looked like, with 2 seals at the bottom. It is not easy to read, but after some time we found that the passage where he mentions a chess set and a horn that were given to the priest Nicholas, and at the end of the middle line here we can see the text Ludus cacorum et unum cornu. The following line ends with the word ludu, and if we turn left to the left side of the document, we see that it's followed by the words cacorum, etc., meaning game of chess or chess set. Hence, this is the second passage in the testament that mentions chess. Well, it was interesting to see that it was possible to actually locate this testament, but there remains one mystery. The second testament from 1379 was not easily found in the National Archives, but Henrik Klackenberg has promised to make some further efforts to locate it, so we will have to wait and see. Well, with that little revisit to the medieval chess history, we end for today, but we'll return again with a new theme in the next program, so see you then.
Well, this was all for this episode of Chess TV. Be sure to tune in again on December the 3rd when we're back with a new episode. Have a great month until then and see you soon. Bye!